Welcome, focus learners, to this comprehensive explainer. If you're deep into your GCSE or Year 8 end of year revisions right now, well, you're in exactly the right place. Today, we're going to conduct a meticulous, stanza-by-stanza masterclass of Carol Ann Duffy's poetry. We're going to be unpacking the structural choices, the complex language layers, and the tonal shifts, really building up these elements much like a beautiful, intricate piece of Ravel's music. So make sure you've got your thinking caps on because we are getting right into the granular details today. Our suite is divided into 5 distinct movements. First, Demeter's grief. Second, the moon's maternal gaze. Third, Anne Hathaway. Fourth, the quick draw crossfire. And finally, number 5, comfort in prayer. Let's kick things off with part 1, the grief of Demeter, from melancholy to maternal relief. Looking closely at the red annotations of our opening stanza here, we can see exactly how Duffy uses the Greek myth of Persephone's kidnapping by Hades to explore these huge themes of family, loss, and the cyclical nature of the seasons. Now, Demeter is the goddess of the harvest, right? And the poem heavily relies on this cyclical form, going from the kidnapping in the field all the way to the eventual return to the field to show the mother's intense desperation and raw maternal instinct right from the very first lines. Think about the deliberate weight of this line. By choosing these highly specific, heavy nouns, granite, flint, the pacing of the stanza slows down drastically. It's totally intentional. It's meant to reflect Demeter's physically frozen state as she deals with the absolute agony of her daughter's absence. Now, what's really interesting here is how the pathetic fallacy of the winter and hard earth directly mirrors her own internal emotional devastation. She states, "my broken heart," which acts as a powerful metaphor showing her complete lack of wholeness without her child. By personifying her heart as a stone trying to break the ice, we truly feel the profound physical and emotional distance she's experiencing in these middle stanzas. But then, moving into the final stanzas, the tone completely shifts. We transition from that melancholic winter into what the annotations beautifully describe as a relieved Mozart-like tone, where Demeter finally sees her daughter returning, bringing literally all of spring's flowers with her. Duffy uses personification with the blue sky smiling and hyperbole to create this incredible dramatic effect of surprise and joyous relief. It all culminates in a rhyming couplet, "Too soon" and "new moon," that signifies happiness, purity, and a really beautiful new beginning. Moving right along to part 2, the moon's maternal gaze, a cosmic shift in perspective. Check out the red annotations again. They elegantly point out the moon's vocation, or its core purpose. Progressing through the opening stanzas, the moon is presented almost as this godly figure whose sole purpose is to serve and observe the earth. Duffy uses a quatrain structure here, that's 4 stanzas of 4 lines each, with no fixed rhyme scheme. This free verse gives it a conversational tone, but the strictly structured stanzas perfectly contrast the moon's wise, immortal stability against the absolute chaos and mortality of humanity down below. Notice, too, how the title actively challenges the traditional patriarchal view of the man in the moon. As we move stanza by stanza, notice how Duffy cleverly lists these specific, everyday foods: a silver of pear, a wedge of lemon, a slice of melon, half an orange. She uses these to visually represent the sequential stages of the lunar cycle. It's a fantastic way to reflect the moon's diet of light and its constant cyclical observation of human life, going from childbirth song all the way to the song of death. The pacing sharpens aggressively right here. The poem turns entirely from its initially affectionate, maternal tone to one of sharp, critical disappointment as the moon observes the 6 seas and dying forests of the earth below. And listen to this guttural alliteration in gaze, gawp, glare. It literally forces you to audibly sound out the moon's disgust. The repeated use of the word darlings, which initially shows the sweet maternal instinct, turns deeply ironic by the end of the poem. The moon isn't affectionate anymore. She is absolutely horrified. The final stanza concludes with a piercing rhetorical question. What have you done? What have you done to the world? Challenging our complete apathy towards nature. All right, let's dive into part 3. Anne Hathaway's romantic sonnet, passion, poetry, and the second best bed. We start with that famous epigraph straight from Shakespeare's Will, "Item I given to my wife my second best bed," and we immediately see the intensely personal connection of their marriage. By leaving his wife the second best bed, which historically was the marital bed where they actually slept, rather than the fancy guest bed, Shakespeare was emphasizing a thrilling, intimate relationship over extreme monetary value. The tone of this opening is just deeply nostalgic, sentimental, and incredibly passionate. Duffy brilliantly uses linguistic and poetic terminology here as an extended metaphor as we move through the poem. She uses words like rhyme, echo, assonance, verb, and noun. It beautifully shows how Shakespeare, the ultimate writer, made Anne the absolute center of their relationship, praising both his writing skills and their profound physical connection. Now, structurally, this is a sonnet, but Duffy deliberately manipulates the traditional Shakespearean rhyme scheme. She does this to show that their relationship was totally unique and couldn't be confined to strict, boring rules. Stanza by stanza, the sensory listing quickens the pace, building up this fast-paced, exhilarating romance. These structural choices firmly degrade ordinary prose, which is represented by those boring guests dozing in the best bed, in the face of their theatrical, sonnet-like love. This all builds up toward the final rhyming couplet at the end of the poem, leaving us on a terribly sad but romantic note as she holds his memory in the casket of my widow's head. Next up is Part 4, the crossfire of quick draw, disconnection, and bitter combat. Pay attention to the heavy red annotations in the opening stanza here, which compare the mobile and landline phones to actual weaponry. They're slung from the pockets on my hips, like guns. This instantly creates a deeply fragmented, bitter tone right from the opening. And the enjumpment, or the lines spill over without any punctuation, just adds to this chaotic, unstable fragmentation. The speaker is completely disconnected from their partner, forced to communicate only through the cold proxies of technology. But despite all the angry, direct statements earlier in the poem, like, "You've wounded me," and references to squeezing the trigger of the tongue, this specific line exposes a desperate, really secretive vulnerability. Notice the repeated, breathy F sounds. Fumble for the phone. This fricative alliteration physically demonstrates the speaker's total weakness. Duffy manipulates the traditional sonnet form here to prove a point. Because of the free verse elements and the distinct lack of rigid structure, it demonstrates the utter instability of the relationship. It's essentially telling us this is not a poem about love. It's a frantic, emotional duel with no clear resolution. And this is brilliantly highlighted by the repetition and trailing ellipses in the final stanza. And this, and this, and this. There's no clean outro, just an ongoing crossfire of bitter betrayal. Finally, we reach Part 5, Finding Comfort in Prayer, the mesmerizing fluidity of everyday faith. Through these final red annotations, we can see how Duffy is arguing that prayer isn't strictly tied to traditional religion. Opening the first stanza, even if we have a complete lack of religious belief, as she states with, "Although we cannot pray, we can still feel spiritually connected to our world." True comfort, she argues, is found in the everyday sounds and quiet moments of life. There's a really sharp contrast here as we move through the stanzas. We move from utter desperation, a woman lifting her head from the sieve of her hands, which is just a powerfully vivid metaphor for extreme sadness and feeling completely drained, to a sudden, surprising ray of hope. The careful sibilance in small, familiar pain creates this beautiful, simple state of being still. This contrasts sharply with the loud, powerful image of a distant train, which acts as a Latin chanting. It reminds us that ordinary, everyday things can provide the exact same hope and comfort as a traditional church service. Duffy structurally guides us through time here. The poem progresses chronologically from day to night to dusk to darkness. Along the way, we hear a child's name being called, representing the innocence and purity of a prayer. And finally, the rhythmic, monotonous listing of the UK shipping forecast, Rockall, Melon, Dogger, Finisterre, acts as this ultimate comforting radio prayer. It proves that the soothing monotony of everyday words really can comfort us, acting as our own personal faith as time marches chronologically forward. So, as you continue your GCSE and Year 8 end-of-year revisions, I want you to actively reflect on this exact question. Ask yourself how decoding these specific red annotations, like the pathetic fallacy in Demeter, the guttural alliteration of the moon, or those brilliantly manipulated sonnets, unlocks the true orchestrated genius behind Carol Ann Duffy's poetry. You have absolutely all the tools you need to ace this. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep focusing on those structural choices and happy studying.